Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar series. My name is Darren McHugh with DTC, a dental IT company serving the Mid-Atlantic. We are proud to continue our webinar series and welcome back Arminco and Bank of America as we continue to find different ways for practices to help maximize their space. Couple of housekeeping items before we get going. Again, these are monthly webinar series that are on the second Thursday of every month at 1 o'clock. These webinars are able to be viewed on our YouTube channel and soon to be on our website. We'll keep you up to date on that. On our website, we're also going to start listing the calendar of upcoming webinars, and you'll actually be able to register online as well through our website. As we're going to go through, we're going to take about 15 minutes with Arminco. They're going to be sharing some fantastic knowledge with us as how you can continue to work on making each room more profitable. And then we're going to have, and that's going to be with Sasha and Mark. Then we're also going to have Bank of America with Mohammed jump in and help us with the financial side to make all these things happen and to understand the financial impact to your practice. You'll notice that you have an ability to raise your hand. We're going to go ahead and do a Q&A at the end of this session, usually about 10 or 15 minutes. We understand that everybody's sort of in lunchtime right now, so we really appreciate you giving up your time to spend with us. And just real quick, and before Arminco starts and Bank of America, when they each start, just give a brief overview of the services that they provide, and I'll do the same with us. So for those of you who are our clients, I see a good number of them online right now joining. And I also see a good number of people who have joined us through our regular webinar link that are not DTC clients. But DTC is an dental IT focused company that is supporting well over 500 dental practices in the Mid-Atlantic area. And we are doing everything from helping with HIPAA compliance to daily backups with cloud storage. We're helping with all the computer problems that you may have in the office. So before you want to throw a computer through a window, call us. We'll help resolve those items. And whether you're doing new office build-outs or expansions or just need day-to-day IT support, that would be us. So anyway, again, welcome to have Sasha and Mark from Arminco. I'm going to turn it over to them, and then they're going to go ahead and turn it over to Mohammed. So Sasha and Mark, welcome aboard, and let's looking forward to hearing your presentation.
We appreciate that, Darren. Do I have control of this slideshow now?
You do.
Okay, thank you. So just a little bit about us. We're actually a national architecture and design firm dedicated to dental and medical. I personally have been an architect and now the senior consultant of architecture and design for Arminco for the past 8 years. So I've done quite a few floor plans and designs in my time. And what I've tried to do in this presentation, everyone's going to have a different opinion on how a floor plan or a design should be. There are 10 different companies that'll tell you to do 10 different ways. I'm going to try to just focus on what I've seen in my 8 years of experience, the most profitable offices and the approaches they've taken. I'm going to try to mix it up with the different, with orthodontists as well as dentists, pediatrics, to try to mix it all in there. But for the most part, it's going to be kind of general with areas of concern. I hope that makes sense. So we'll start with, how do I make this go forward? Okay. So one of the most key areas that I always see mistakes with, and I'm always, when I teach my residency program students, I have them do their own floor plans and bring them, and so I can critique it for them, is the check-in and check-out areas. The old school way of dentistry was you had this big check-in, this window, and then you had this check-out. Actually, this left side here is what a lot of people are used to seeing. You checked in. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse. Can they see my mouse, Darren? I don't know if you can hear me, but
yeah, they can. They can see your mouse.
Okay, so you check in here, you went through this door, and you checked out here. The problem with this approach and why this is kind of an old school way of doing it is, this is an area of heavy congestion, and you're usually going to want more people checking out than checking in. This is a simple walk up, you check in, you sit down. There isn't much more going on up here. Here is where bills are being paid. delinquencies are being discussed. And this setup, I understand the reason, the design behind it. It's to maximize the space, but this is, from a patient standpoint, a customer standpoint, the least popular version. And what you're going to have is, and you have multiple people checking out in a busy office. This is where all your congestion is being. And now you've got people walking in to go to chairs. You've got people standing here. And if you've got a patient with kids, or you've got a spouse with them, this gets very crowded very quick. And this is a big area of concern. What dentistry is kind of leaning towards now is kind of a more semi-private and private checkout. This is a large office. I've included in both these floor plans at one point or another I've worked on, but this is kind of a larger office. But what this doctor did, which is ideal, and he had the room for it, is he has his check-in here, and then he's got these semi-private checkouts, almost checkout stations. These can be half walls. These don't have to be anything more than just some sort of partition separating the three customers checking out here, paying bills, rescheduling, that sort of thing. And what this does is frees up this hallway, and the patients over the years of doing this appreciate this a lot more than standing here while this person in this chair can hear you and this person in the waiting room can hear you. This wall doesn't really do much to stop sound. This is a lot better for HIPAA compliance than this setup. The check-in area should be smaller than your checkout area. Make no mistake about it. Other people might say it's the other way around, but your check-in area is a one-person station. I've got a lot of doctors who are using iPads. They've got one person smiling there with two iPads, so up to 3 people could even check in. But your check-in area should ideally be smaller than your checkout area, because that's where your congestion is going to be. I understand with space limitations, this can sometimes be difficult, but you don't necessarily have to have multiple checkout stations. Even one semi-private checkout station is more ideal than this. This is kind of the old school way of doing it versus this. So if I take one thing from check-in and checkout areas, your check-in area, make it pretty, make it beautiful, have a smiling face there. Your checkout area should be large and accommodate up to 2 people checking out at once to prepare you for any growth in the future. I'm going to go to the next slide now. Operatory setup and prop sizing. This is a huge question. I get this at everything from the AO for orthodontists to the ADA. Every state I visit, I always get asked, what's the ideal size for operatories? There are companies out there that'll tell you you should squeeze every inch and get as many ops as you can. There are also companies out there who will tell you, oh no, your op should be roomy so the client is comfortable. It's kind of a mixture of both. I tend to prefer a less cluttered op. Minimize your cabinetry. I got a lot of doctors who get a side sink, an island at 12 o'clock, and before you know it, they've spent $20,000 in cabinetry on one operatory. And when I show them other options, it's always the same thing. Well, I didn't know, this is how I was told to do it. I didn't know I had other options. You can always share a sink, which is a great way to save money. You genuinely don't want too much cabinetry in your op unless you're doing surgery, unless you're an oral surgeon or even possibly an endo or perio, but you generally don't want too much cabinetry, because what ends up happening is the staff uses that cabinetry as their private locker. So yes, you've got your storage where you've got your gloves and your gauze and everything, but then hygienist A and hygienist B suddenly use these drawers located here to store all their personal stuff. And now you're over-ordering, your office manager is reordering gauze or any disposables you didn't need over and over, and now you've got a surplus because people are hiding stuff. So be wary of cabinets. Also, cabinets are expensive. Minimize clutter. I've got a lot of doctors, you walk in, there's pictures on the wall, TVs, cabinets, chairs. I understand the need for certain things. You should be able to show your patients patient charts. This is actually a nice monitor setup. You should have somewhere, I'm sorry, not patient charts, somewhere you can show your patients x-rays. You should have an area for yourself for your patient charts. I understand that, but I get doctors who have, 15 pieces of art on this wall. They've got cables running all over the place for equipment that they've no longer used. Keep it neat and clean. From what I've heard from patients don't really pay attention to the design of an operatory. They just want to make sure that it's clean. And actually, I think I say it even here. It's the bedside manner and the cleanliness of the op is what they pay attention to when it comes to design. In this picture here, you can see there's a very nicely designed hallway. That's perfect. I even put, I think in my next slide, your hallway should be gorgeous because it's kind of the pathway to the operatory. But there's no reason. I always try to steer doctors away from putting marble on the wall, stone, stacks. So I've seen some of the craziest ways doctors can spend money, and trust me, they don't. The patients don't appreciate it. It's the same thing even with equipment. I don't mean to cut down equipment, but a patient doesn't know the difference between an ADEC chair and another chair. A patient's not going to walk in and say, "Oh, thank God, it's the ADEC chair." So just be wary of how you're spending money and where it matters. Take care of yourself as well as the patients. A lot of general dentists say, what is the optimum size for an op? An optimum size for an op, I try to make them 11 feet in length by 9 feet in width. What that does is that leaves ample room for a 12 o'clock delivery setup or a chair delivery setup. Obviously, that can be cut down. Most of the time, once I know if it's going to be a chair delivery and not 12 o'clock, I can cut the 11 feet down. Same thing with the 9 feet. I've done them as wide as 8 feet. Anytime you get too congested and tight, it becomes too much like a in and out office. You want your patient to be comfortable. So as far as everything outside of general dentistry, open base for orthodontists, pedodontists, oral surgery, it really depends on the treatment and the need and the procedures involved. I can't say there's a standard for oral surgery. I can say an oral surgery office is going to be significantly larger. You should expect somewhere between 12 by 10 or 10 by 10, at least 100 square feet. Open bay, I try to make my center to center chair for my orthodontist at least 7 feet. That leaves room for the cart delivery system and the doctor to do his work. So as far as standards for ops, I can't say there's for the specialty there are standards. All I can say is as long as you're working with a professional who has experience in that specialty, they'll know based on what you tell them a bunch of keywords how to design the op. Let me make sure I didn't forget anything in the slide before I move forward. The third bullet point I just want to reiterate, it's not always about maximizing operatories. I understand each operatory is money in your pocket. I get that. But you want to maximize your operatories while still maintaining the quality for the customer, because you don't want the customer to not want to come back. You want them to say, wow, that was a gorgeous office. Plus, I didn't have to wait because they had 5 or 6 chairs set up. There was really no wait. So try to combine the two. There are companies out there that will teach you fill it with ops. And there are companies out there that will teach you take 2,000 square foot and put 2 ops. Try to combine the two if you can. And I know that's kind of difficult to wrap around, but a true professional, a design professional who's worked in the industry will be able to accommodate your needs. I'm going to go to the next slide now. There's another big question I get. People always say, where should I spend the money? Let's say I've got my contract is $150,000 for build out and I want to spend $10,000, $15,000. Where should I spend money? I always tell doctors, you want to focus on the waiting room. By waiting room, I don't necessarily mean materials on the wall. I mean your reception facing, your reception area, and your patient restrooms. These are the areas sometimes, especially for general dentists, when you have your walk-ins, they're going to judge a walk-in or even visiting your site on the pictures they find or see on the internet. So I get a lot of doctors who say, yeah, I get a lot of walk-ins from people who checked us out on Google Maps or Google and saw pictures of our office and came in because of that reason. That's great. That's the reason we're spending this money. We're not spending this money just so it looks pretty. We're trying to attract more clientele. Try to focus on spending your money in your reception, your waiting room, make it comfortable. I always recommend a beverage station. Try to stay away from anything too much more. I mean, coffee I understand, but if you're doing any pedo, I wouldn't recommend coffee or tea. It becomes a huge mess. Try to stick with water bottles, maybe small plastic juice bottles for the kids. I've just noticed in the past that it becomes a little messy. Another consideration is hallways are a good area to consider. Like I said in the last slide, they've seen this gorgeous reception desk. They've met your very personable, nice person at the front desk. Now it's just a matter of bringing it all together. If they go through this gorgeous hallway, they see the effort you put into money you've spent to make their experience better, they'll appreciate that. That way, once they get to the op, they're already dead set that this is a gorgeous office. And that's where it comes back to not spending crazy amounts on the ops. Just focus on having a good setup, clean setup, nice, clean, ready, modern chair. Make sure you take care of yourself as a doctor. I always tell doctors, you're spending this much on patients. Please spend the extra money and get an ergonomic chair to take care of your back. I can't believe how many young doctors I know who are already complaining about backaches. And I'm like, well, you spent, $20,000 making a reception look nice when you forgot to buy yourself ergonomic chairs. Just keep in mind, another key point is sometimes less is more. one of my offices in the past, years ago, won third place for Dental Design of the Year, and it was one of the most simple but modern designs I've done. I didn't even have any marble. I didn't have anything unique from Italy. I get a lot of doctors who want Italian marble. They want glass everywhere. Guys, just sometimes less is more. Even in this drawing, actually. This is not even real wood on this wall here. This is stick wood. It's wood that's sliced into cardboard thickness, and then it's stuck to the wall, so it gives the impression of real wood. Real wood on this wall would have been probably triple the cost. LED lights, this is a cheap way to really enhance an office. You can buy LED lights on Amazon for 120 bucks these days, a whole string of them. This floor even looks gorgeous, looks expensive. This is LVT vinyl flooring. This is $2.50, $3 a square foot for the luxury flooring. You can have a gorgeous office without spending a lot of money. And when you're working with the contractor, keep in mind, guys, drywall is the cheapest material cost, but it's also the most expensive labor cost, especially to have curves, things like this. You get a lot of doctors who are like, well, I'll just do everything in drywall and have cutouts here or there. Your contractor is going to make you pay for it because it might cost them $100 in drywall sheets, but it's going to cost them $3,000 in labor to get it all looking pretty in this way. So key points in this one, sometimes less is more. Keep it clean. Use materials that are going to last. LVT is a great example. I try to tell my clients, except for my PED clients, to kind of steer away from carpet. Carpet's got a shelf life. From the day you install it, be prepared. You're going to change it. It's just the way. Even if you have the highest grade, thickest commercial carpet, with the amount of foot traffic, especially if you're ground floor, you've got no common area, let's say a retail space, your carpet's going to get torn up in 3 to 4 years. And if it's me, you're going to call me and say, Sasha, why'd you sell me this carpet? I've got it. My waiting room went from tan carpet to black carpet. So I try to steer patients or my clients away from carpet unless they specifically request it. Darren, I don't know. Do questions come at the end, or should I have some time left over for questions?
No, we'll go ahead and do them at the end.
Okay, I think that's my 15 minutes. I know I went through it super quick. I just wanted to say one last thing. On average, Northern Virginia, D.C., Maryland dental office is going to be about $80 to $85 a square foot for a build-out, and that doesn't include certain design elements. Most doctors will spend between $10,000 and $20,000 on top of that number for design elements. These are elements no contractor can price out because they don't know what you want until a designer designs it. It's impossible if I'm your contractor. I happen to be one of the architects here, but if I were the contractor, it's impossible for me to know what the architect's going to spec out until the design is complete. But he can give you a ballpark for the things that are important: paint, ceiling, floor, plumbing, electrical, mechanical, all that stuff, HVAC. So just keep that in mind. $80 to $85 square foot for a new build out, $10,000 to $20,000 in design elements afterwards. Design elements, just so you guys know, are not flooring and paint. Those are marble, glass, stacked stone, fireplaces. I got doctors something that's fireplace, waterfalls if you want to get crazy. Guys, stay away from waterfalls. If any of you fans of waterfalls, they're a mess. Just stay away from waterfalls. But those are your design elements. And I guess that's it for my 15 minutes.
All right, great. Thanks for sharing that. We're going to go ahead. Mohammed is going to jump on in here. And Mohammed, we'll go ahead and pull up your screen. And you should be able to have control. And Mohammed, make sure we can hear you okay.
All right.
Yep, there you are. Good. Great. Go ahead, Mohammed.
Are you seeing the Practice Solutions slide there?
We are. Yep.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the invite, Darren, and Sasha, thank you for going through that. So my name is Mohammed Abdullah. I am the Dental Regional Manager for our Practice Solutions group. Practice Solutions is a specialty group within Bank of America that lends specifically to the private practice market, and I manage the Mid-Atlantic region for our dental team. So having said that, I just really wanted to talk a little bit about what we look at from a lending perspective and what most banks, I believe, look at when you are a practice in growth mode. So when we take a look at the lending needs when you're either doing an office renovation or you're doing an additional location, when we look at your profile as a borrower, dentist, there are three things that we look at, called the three C's, and I have them up there. We take a look at your credit. So we want to see your repayment history, FICO score. We also want to take a look at the capital that you have for your personal financial statement. So I think the big thing is making sure that you're lendable by having good liquidity and low revolving debt. What that means is there's going to be necessary debts that you're going to have as a practice owner, whether that's student loans, whether that's a practice loan that you started 5 years ago, or a practice loan that you still have when you purchased the practice 5 years ago, mortgage, auto. Those are what we consider kind of good debt. So some of the debts that we look at that aren't considered good debts are things like revolving lines of credit, so like credit cards, unsecured type of debts, department store cards. So when you take a look and see credit and capital, they're very well tied together, because if you as a borrower don't have a lot in the way of liquidity, it's usually because of how you manage your revolving debt and your unsecured debt. So, and that kind of ties into the third C, which is capacity, which in this case, are you living within your means? Do you have a profitable practice, and how does that translate to paying your bills, and what do you have left over from there? So I think the biggest factor from a dental specific lender is not your credit score on the basis of just that. It's not how much money you have, it's about total cash flow. It can be great that you have a practice that produces $1 million and you take home $500,000 a year. That's phenomenal. That's a practice with 50% profitability. And you may even have a 700 FICO score, but you have $25,000 a month between your student loans, your mortgage, your practice loans, your credit cards. Those things matter. So it's all about the actual cash flow in totality. So there are a few keys here that I'll tell you in preparation for making this kind of move for your practice. I would say the first thing is make sure that you work on your personal financial statement. And what I mean by that is you want to have at least, and this is a rule of thumb, try to have at least 10% of what you're looking to borrow in actual cash on hand. So if you're looking for a $500,000 loan to do a major renovation or to open up a new office or relocate your office, try to have 10% of that available in liquidity, and that's, in this example, would be $50,000. The second part of the personal financial statement is that you want to make sure you keep your revolving debt low. So if I were to tell you that we have two scenarios, we have one dentist that has $250,000 in student loan debt and $20,000 in cash versus someone that has no student loan debt and $5,000 in cash, I would rather go with someone that has a bit more liquidity. And even if the debt level is higher, because one dentist has over 200 grand more than the other in actual debt, because it's student loans, because it's secured debt, it doesn't hurt you as much. So we've seen plenty of folks that get caught in that type of scenario where their liquidity position isn't very strong, and that's because they're very debt averse. They rush to pay things off. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you have to make sure it fits within the greater plan for your lending needs. The second thing that I'll tell you is you want to make sure that your profitability margins for your practice are at least average as far as industry standards are concerned. And I will tell you, we deal with a lot of accountants. We speak to a lot of accountants. We present on many levels, and we have a whole host of endorsements nationally. There is a lending strategy and there's a tax strategy. So make sure that you're speaking to your accountant anytime you know you're going to need to make a project move, if you will. If you know in the next year or two you're thinking about going in and purchasing a building or doing a complete renovation to your practice, make sure that you're having those conversations early, because you want to make sure that your profitability margin for the practice is average, which I would tell you that about 25 to 30% is a good indicator of profitability on a practice. So hopefully you're able to do that, if not more. We talked about your credit score. Not everything is about your FICO score. Usually when you're talking about commercial loans, it's one of those things where if you meet a certain score and above, then it's fine. So if a lender says 680 is our cutoff, whether you have 681 or 820, your rate is going to be the same. So it's not as much as heavily weighted on FICO score, whereas the mortgage industry, personal mortgages, it's the exact opposite. It's very, very FICO score driven and sensitive, whereas here it's not as much as long as you meet kind of that minimal number. And then the last one is, I would say, project type. It's about what are you looking to do, and talk to me about the scale of what the project is. To Sasha's point, you can essentially design and do it however you think you want to do it, and they could make that happen, I'm sure, but where does that fit with your practice and you financially? Are you expanding 1,000 square feet and doing 3 operatories? Or do you want to relocate and double your square footage, go from 3,000 to 6,000 square feet? Do you have the capacity? Do you have the manpower? Will the numbers work? Those are all things that you should be thinking about when you're thinking about undertaking this kind of project. If you notice, I think I've been talking for almost 10 minutes or so, and we haven't talked about interest rates and terms. Those things are very important, and those things will be talked about, but it coincides more about just work on kind of having your affairs in order when it comes to your personal financial statement, setting the table, make sure your credit card debt is paid down. And look, it's okay to have credit card or unsecured debt. It's just all relative to your situation. So just if you have the choice of paying that down versus something else, it's probably for the better, and you'll see a direct correlation with your FICO score, as it would be positively affected. So my last slide is just talking about what you want to look for in a loan. You want to make sure the term is conducive to your vision and your total cash flow in your situation. There are terms that can be 3 years, they can go all the way up to 15 years. You want to make sure you're approved for the right amount to do the project. And what I think you'll be pleased to hear, you can speak to a dental specific lender very early and say, I'm thinking about expanding my practice, or I'm thinking about doing a remodel. I don't know how much exactly yet, but I know that this is something I want to do. Your financials or your practice tax return, we can review those things and come back to you and say, based off of your situation and your practice, we can approve you for up to this dollar amount, which hopefully should make it easier for you when you go to a Sasha and say, hey, these are my plans, this is what I want to do. And he says, well, if you're going to do this, this is roughly how much it's going to cost. And you obviously will have a pretty good idea of whether that fits the approval or not. You want to make sure that any loan that you go into doesn't have a lot in the way of fees. And as long as you're avoiding the SBA, you're probably generally, for traditional loans, not going to see a lot of fees. There shouldn't be any upfront fees. Make sure you get a very good interest rate, and you want to try to fix that rate as soon as you can. Rates are back on the upswing. They've been low for a long time, and we're seeing trends that they're starting to increase, and they're going to continue to do so. So if this is something you're thinking about doing in the coming weeks, months, it might be a good idea to start the process to at least have a dialogue. And when you do get a rate, make sure you lock it in, because rates are going up. You want to make sure that whoever you're working with is going to be servicing the loan, that it's not going to be sold to someone else, that they have a niche and industry knowledge about what they're doing. Make sure you have flexibility with prepayment and principal reduction options. Want to make sure your payment structure fits. And I think what you'll find is, while the project is going on, you're not required to make payments. So if you're doing an office remodel or an expansion, or even opening up an additional location, if it takes 3, 4, 5 months for that to complete, you're not going to be making payments during that period. And the reason we don't get too caught up in having you run around and get bids and doing a lot of that up front is that once you're approved, those things are going to naturally happen. It's going to be a progression when you start talking to folks. And so I would tell you that during the project, payments will be made to your contractor, to your architect, to your equipment folks, legal fees, and everything in between. And you're not going to be required to start the clock on repayment until your project is complete and you're seeing patients at the new facility. So I know I've only had 4 slides, but if there's one big takeaway that I would have is make sure as you're setting yourself up, especially if you're planning on doing something in the coming months, have the rate discussions now because rates are going up. And most importantly, just focus on your personal financial statement and understand that if you're dealing with a dental specific bank, there are debts that are acceptable. If you have a lot in student loans, mortgage, and practice debt, that's okay. Keep your liquidity strong and just try to keep your revolving debt low. Anything that's not secured on a personal level, you want to keep that as low as possible.
All right. So, Mohammed, thanks for all that great information. I'm looking at the questions that are coming through here from the attendees. One of the ones, and I know you guys sort of both touched on this, but let's see. When should a practice start looking at the idea of expansion or renovation? And
Yeah, I
either
think
Sasha or Mohammed, feel free to jump in.
so. I'll tell you from a banking perspective. We have folks that come to us 6-7 months before they get started to say, hey, what does this look like if I were to do this? How much can my practice support if I wanted to do this? Because what that does is that sets the table for the conversation with Sasha about what they want to do and making sure they have the availability to be able to do it. We have doctors that call us a week or 2 before to say, hey, I have 1,000 square feet that I'm going to get from the landlord. We worked everything out. This is how much I need. Can you get me approved? So I don't think it's ever too early, especially when you're doing a lot of the legwork, and it could vary. Ideally, I would tell you that if you could start the process and get an approval in place a few months before you start engaging everything, I think that it's a lot less stressful, and you have a better idea of what you can and cannot do. And I hope, Sasha, you can chime in on this. Hopefully it's helpful for the architect and the construction company you're working with when you've gone through that, knowing that that's already done. Sasha, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually fully agree with pretty much everything Mohammed said. The earlier you can get someone like me involved, the better. Just be wary. I can only speak for our company. We don't charge to answer questions, evaluate job sites, evaluate space potentials. So just be wary. A lot of architects do. They don't sign a contract until you're 95% sure you're going to a space, and someone like Mohammed has told you have the money. But yeah, the earlier the better.
All right. Sasha, this one's more for you, I would imagine. When someone is looking at adding space, either converting converting a office to an operatory or possibly taking over space next door, what should they look for?
So the main thing to look for whenever you're doing an expansion is obviously first, the reason most doctors do an expansion is to add ops. So I'm just going to focus on adding ops. If you're doing an expansion, the most important thing is plumbing. That's the most expensive thing when it comes to dentistry is plumbing. I get a lot of doctors who go, this 1,000 square feet opened up next door. I want to add another op. And I'm like, sure, but it's still going to be very expensive because if you're ground floor, I've got to trench the concrete from whatever the existing drain and plumbing lines are all the way to the new chair. And that's shutdown time for your office, as well as permits costs, architectural costs, and construction costs. Now, there are other doctors who say, listen, I just want to expand my waiting room. I'm okay with the 5 ops I have, or I want to add let's say I want to move my staff lounge to a new area and make my existing staff lounge into a large lab. That's different. Anytime you have existing plumbing and electrical in the space, you're in much better shape. just be very wary. It's adding drywall to the space next door is the easiest part. It's the plumbing that's required for chairs. When Mark and I go to a site, the very first thing we look for is, okay, where is the plumbing? Where is it coming from? And how can we tie into it? For your air, your vacuum, for your deliveries, as well as your water for your any sinks you might need.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. I guess that plumbing part is certainly a great unknown and want to get that identified right away. Another question here. How long of an approval process, or how long does the approval process take on the financial lending side?
Yeah, so I'll tell you that to get an approval could be less than a week. Once your financials are submitted, usually it's within a few days from there. So that part of it happens very quickly, as it's a traditional loan and it's not an SBA, Small Business Administration loan. And once you're approved, that approval is usually good for 4 months. So that's how, to Sasha's point, leverage the people that you're working with, and it's okay to have this kind of dialogue without necessarily giving any commitments, because the people that are in the space tend to be more informative and educational than they are kind of salesy, if you will. So about a week is probably a good fair estimate.
All right, great. One last question, and this one would be for both of you to add in here. What would you consider the first step for moving forward?
Could you say that again, Darren? It kind of broke.
Sure. The question is for each one of you, what is the first step to do to move forward?
First, well, I'm probably going to answer for Mohammed here, but before you start looking for spaces, before you speak to an architect, I think the very first step, in my opinion, is talk to a bank. Talk to Mohammed first, because if Mohammed's, if there's no point in finding a space doing architectural drawings if you've got some red flags in because a professional like Mohammed will tell you, he'll say, listen, these are the areas of concern that you're not going to be able to get a competitive loan. Let's focus on fixing these, and then maybe in a few years trying again. But I'll let Mohammed chime in if I don't want to.
Yeah, I think, certainly making sure the money aspect of it is right is definitely very important. And we do want to try to get engaged early so we can point you in the right direction. I think a second part of that is make sure that it's conducive to your existing situation. And what I mean by that is if you're thinking about relocating or doing a big renovation project, how does it fit? So for a renovation project, how big of a project is it? How much time do I need to put into this where I'm not going to be seeing patients? What will that do for me financially? So make sure that you could kind of, as we're sitting here in New York in corporate meetings in the middle of a storm, make sure you can kind of weather that storm if it's that size of a project. The second part of it is, especially if this involves something outside of your existing space that you're thinking about relocating, how does this work with my existing lease? How many months do I have left? If I cut off my lease early, have I negotiated with my landlord to be able to get away from here without having hefty penalties, or do I have to stay here for another 3 years? So it's great to be able to think about doing these ambitious programs and even being approved for them, but how does that fit with the other things that you have going on? Because that can get very costly if you're not taking into account those things.
All right, great. Well, again, I want to go ahead and just thank everyone for joining us again, giving up your time. Sasha, Mark, and Mohammed, as always, really appreciate the input that you guys have. We know that you guys are donating your time here, and this is certainly all for the greater good of the dental community. So we appreciate that. If anybody has any questions for that or remaining, certainly please feel free to go ahead and let us know. We'll make sure that you have all the contact information. Our next webinar is going to be on March 9th at 1 o'clock, and we are going to be we're going to continue on the on the maximizing your space to dollars side, and this is going to focus on dealing with the insurance company, how to get a better better return from the insurance companies and negotiating with them. We're going to have Unitas PPO Solutions as our partner joining us. And again, if you're unable to attend at that time, go ahead and still register for it so that you'll be able to view and listen to the webinars at your own convenience. But again, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you all next time. Take care, everyone.